So the topic I was asked to discuss today is extremely difficult. Yesoidas Shmita. If we could just have the first few psukim Parshas Bahar on the screen, and I'll just explain how all the various different halachas are derived from Psukei HaTorah in the beginning of Parshas Bahar. So let me give a brief introduction. Hilchos Shmita are divided into two fundamental categories. One is Shavis Oretz, Mitzvahs Aseh and Lo Ta'aseh. וידבר השם אל מוישה בהר סיני עליהם ידבר אל בני ישראל ויאמרתו אליהם כי סבו על האורץ אשר אני נויסו לכם ושבסה אורץ שבס לשם. That is a mitzvah aseh. ששולם תזדסו דרכו, ששולם תז מקומך והוספתו אסתבוסו ובשבועון השביעי שבס שבוסו נהיה לאורץ. Once again, mitzvahs aseh. And then, Sot Choloi Tizro, Kama Choloi Tizmor, that is a mitzvah lo ta'aseh. Shnas Shabosin Ti'ala Oretz, number 3. The mitzvah say is 3 times and a lav. The common denominator, both the mitzvah say and the lav, deal with Shavisa Oretz. The prohibition to do avodas ha'oretz va'avodas hu'ilonos. The Rambam divides this, avodas ha'oretz, avodas hu'ilonos. But that is one category. A far bigger category is kedushas shvius. What are the dinam of peiros shvius? So we need to keep on reading, and we go over to Posek A. Esfiach ketzich lo tiktzor ves invei nezirech lo tivtzor shna shaviyin oretz v'hoiso Shabbos ha'oretz lechem la'ochala. Shabbos ha'oretz is intended la'achila lecha o la'avdecho la'amascho l'schicho v'leteshavcho hagorem imach levehemtecho v'lachai asher be'ashercho tia kol tva'asa lechol. First of all, there's a machlokes whether there's a mitzvah to eat peiros shvius. The pasuk says, "V'hoisu Shabbos ha'oretz lechem la'achalo." However, in the Sefer HaMitzvos of the Rambam, we do not find a mitzvah aseh associated with peiros shvius. And the Ramban, mitzvah aseh Yuzayin, wonders why the Rambam omits the mitzvah of V'hoiso Shabbos ha'oretz lechem la'achalo. So obviously, according to the Ramban, this is a mitzvah aseh. But now we have a controversy. Exactly what does the Ramban have in mind? The Noise Kalem of the Rambam and Ramban in Sefer HaMitzvos understood that according to the Ramban, there's a mitzvah aseh to eat peiros shvius. Chazon Ish argues, no. Let me take a Sefer HaMitzvos out of my bookcase, unless you have the Sefer HaMitzvos, the Soda of the Ramban. Just one moment. I think I explained many times that at the end of mitzvahs aseh in the Rambam, Sefer HaMitzvos, and once again, at the culmination, the end of the mitzvahs lo ta'aseh, the Rambam adds on various mitzvahs, and he wonders, why did the Rambam omit and skip these mitzvahs? It is not Yud Zayin, as I said before. Sometimes even my amazing memory pulls tricks on me, and it is not Yud Zayin, just one moment. Mitzvah Shlishis, the third mitzvah, that according to the Rambam omitted, and we have it on our screen. Shomre Torah bepeiros shvius v'hoisu Shabbos ha'oretz lechem la'achalo v'dorsho la'achalo v'lo l'schairo. So the Chazon Ish argues, even according to the Ramban, there is no mitzvah aseh to eat. What the Ramban comments and his critique of the Rambam is, this is a lava bo machlal asay, and the Rambam should have counted it in the minyan, la'achla velo l'schoira. And this is a big machlokes. Is there a mitzvah asay to eat Peiros Shvius? Early commentators understood from the Ramban, yes. Rav Kook in Shabbos HaOretz, his understanding of the Ramban is, yes, there's a mitzvah to eat Peiros Shvius. The Chazon Ish argues no. And the Ramban seems to support the Chazon Ish understanding. V'amru Torah, b'Peiros Shvius, v'oisu Shabbos HaOretz lechem la'ochlo, v'dorsho la'ochlo, v'lo l'schoira. So, whether there's a mitzvah say to eat Peiros Shvius is a matter of dispute, a matter of question. But everybody agrees that that's a Gemara Psachim Daf Nun Beis. From the word la'achlo, we learn two halachas. La'achlo v'lo lehefsed, la'achlo v'lo l'schoira. You are not allowed to destroy Peiros Shvius. La'achlo v'lo lehefsed. And you're also not allowed to do schoira in Peiros Shvius because these peiros essentially are not yours. You have no ownership. They are hefker, so there's an isser of hefsid and an isser of schoira. Let's go back to the psukim. Va'achlo evyoinei amacha. V'oisu Shabbos HaOretz lechem la'achlo v'lacha la'avdocha la'masecha v'leschir v'letoshavcha. And the pasuk says va'achlo evyoinei amacha. That means that Peiros Shvius are hefker. You have no bailes. The peiros are hefker. So we started off with Shvis HaOretz, asay v'lo ta'aseh. And then v'hoisu Shabbos HaOretz lechem la'achalo. Question number one, is there a mitzvah of achila? A machlokes between Chazon Ish and others. Two dinim, lo lehefsed v'lo l'schoira. Hefker. Regarding hefker, there's a big, big discussion. Is the Torah mafkir Peiros Shvius? And it is defined as afkato de malka? Or is the Torah obligate the bailim to be mafkir? And there are various nafkaminas between the two different approaches. If the bailim is not mafkir, is there an isur geser? And how about a field that is in the possession of a cheresh, shoita v'kotten, that cannot do hefker? They are excluded from hefker because they are not considered bnei dat. Could people still take their fruit? Is it hefker mitzad din Torah, or is the bailam chayovim lahafker? That is a huge discussion. I feel a bit strange about giving this introduction because this introduction that I'm giving you right now should be an introduction for 30 shiurim. Each topic we're just briefly touching on is a huge sugya. From this prosik we learn the concept of biur. So one of the halachas of Kiddush Shvius is Kol zman shechayor cheles min hasoda, odam oichel metoich habayis. Kol alachaya min hasoda, ein odam oichel betoich habayis. Peiros Shvius are hefker. Anybody could collect Peiros Shvius, take them home. He cannot take home a huge quantity. He cannot sell. But he could take home peiros as needed for the consumption of him and his family. And he eats those fruits. However, when the fruits are no longer on the trees, kola lachaya min hasoda, that is man habiur. And biur means whatever you have at home, you need to throw out of your house and be mafkir lerabi. One additional halacha. V'oiso Shabbos HaOretz lechem la'achalo. Min hamushbes ato oichel, v'lo min hamishumar v'hanevad. Mishuma v'nevad is also ba'achila. And it's a huge machlokes between the Chazon Ish, Anshe Yerushalayim, Chachmi Yerushalayim. In two different areas, Kedusha Shvius v'Peres Nachon. Are we machmir kedas al shoinem that there is a prohibition and isur to eat peres that are shomor v'nevad? So I just gave a brief introduction in which we touched upon all the fundamentals of Shvius. The most fundamental criteria is two different sugyas. Kedushas HaPeres. Kedushas HaPeres includes many details. Mitzvah Achila, Hefset, Schoira, Hefker, Biur, Shomor v'Nevad. 7 sugyas. But we're going back to Shvisas Ha'oretz because I understand that most of your Hachana was regarding Shvisas Ha'oretz. And there's a big machlokes, Minchas Chinuch and Chazon Ish. To my dismay, the new edition of Minchas Osha is not out yet. We're working on it. I hope in the very near future. There's so much work to be done, and I'm only a small little human being. So I hope it'll be out B'Korov. But maybe you do have the previous version, which is also an amazing sefer. I hope Rabbi Garazman has. Siman Aleph and Minchas Osha and Shvius is about the concept of Shvisas Ha'oretz. The Minchas Chinuch and 4 different sources in his amazing sefer. Tzadik Beis, Reish Tzadik Ches, Shin Chovav, Shin Chov Tes. 4 different sources the Minchas Chinuch maintains that Shvisas Ha'oretz in a way is similar to Shvisas Behemtoi. And just like a person bears responsibility that his behemoth should be Shovis and Shabbos. And if he rented out his animal to a non-Jew and he stipulated that the non-Jew does not work with his animal, whether it's a mule or a horse or an oxen, and he stipulated that he doesn't work on Shabbos, and he becomes aware that the non-Jew is working on Shabbos, he needs to be mafkir his behemoth. Otherwise, he's oy b'shvisas behemtoi. Minchas Chinuch maintains the same applies to Shvius. He needs to be mafkir sedehu. If anybody, Jew or non-Jew, is working in his field, Chazon Ish disagrees, and the Chazon Ish says Shvisas Ha'oretz is all about the Gavra, nothing about the Chefza. Rabbi Garazman, could we have Perek Aleph Halacha Aleph Rambam Shmita v'Yovel? I'm sure we have it. Very first Halacha Rambam Hilchos Shmita v'Yovel. Could we have it on the screen?
In about 10 seconds, it'll come up. No, Rav Pesach, it's there. It's just scroll down from that. Pesach, just scroll down. You don't have to go on Hebrew books. Scroll down. It's right there. There we go.
So I am reading the Rambam, and hopefully here we'll have it in a moment. Great. Mitzvah say, Lish Beis B'Shona Shvius Ma'avodas Oz Avodas Alon Shenemar B'Shavso Shabbos L'Shem. So the Rambam clearly writes, what's the mitzvah? Lishbot. And the Rambam continues, V'chalo Weissam Alocha mi'avodas ha'oretz o'elones b'shon hazu betel mitzvah say b'avad alo ta'aseh. So the Rambam twice in the very first halacha stresses it's all about the gavra. It's not about the chefza. Unlike Shvisas behemtoi is about the animal, Shvisas ha'oretz is about the gavra. And the only way a person is over on mitzvahs to say is kolo oisa malacha mi'avodas ha'oretz oihu eilonos bitol mitzvahs to say. So the Rambam clearly seems to contradict the Minchas Chinuch, but we have a problem. Could we scroll back to Protei HaMitzvahs? I saw it on the screen a moment ago. Okay. Shetishbes ha'oretz mamalachto b'shvius. It's totally not only unreasonable, inconceivable that the Rambam contradicts himself. Menei ubei, toich kedei dibur. The Rambam in Protei HaMitzvahs writes Shetishbes ha'oretz. And that's the Havon of the Minchas Chinuch. And then the Rambam in the very first halacha writes, Lishbois, Koloisa Malacha. And that's the Chazon Ish. So to be Miyashav the Rambam, I wrote, and I think it's Torah Semes. I think there's no other way to understand the Rambam. There's a difference between Shisas Behemtoi and generally Shvisa and Shabbos and Shvisa Sa'oretz. Shvisa and Shabbos is about the person and his possessions. Shvisa Sa'oretz is on the Gavra, like the Rambam clearly writes in the very first halacha. Shabbos, we need to be shoyvis because the Torah wants us to rest. Laman yanuach. Shmita, we need to abstain from working in the fields because the land needs to rest. Shavsa ha'oretz Shabbos lasha. In the past almost 2 years, more than a year and a half that we've been learning together, I think we had many opportunities. And in many shiurim I gave in the Yarchei Kala in the past decade, not only the virtual Yarchei Kala, but the actual Yarchei Kala in Yerushalayim. This fundamental idea came up again and again and again. There are two different categories of mitzvahs Torah. Bein b'mitzvahs aseh or bein b'mitzvahs lo ta'aseh. Many mitzvahs are avodas hakel in its purest essence. Other mitzvahs are all about the result, about the outcome, not about actually performing a certain act and deed, but bringing about the result. And I explained in one of the shiurim, all the mitzvahs of Seder Yom are actually avodas hakel. Tefillah, Kriyas Shema, Meyah Brochis v'Kol Yom. The same applies to Chagim and Moedim. Kiddusha v'Avdalta, Matzah Moreh, Sukkah Lulav. Many mitzvahs are only about the result. Everybody understands that building a Micah is not an essence of avodas Hashem. It is all about pen yipol anoifel, loy sosim domim beveisecho. And I think that is the difference between Shvisa and Shabbos and Shvisa Sa'oretz v'Shviyas. Shabbos, it's about the Gavra. Yes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to rest. Probably because he wants this day to be dedicated. Lemenucha v'lekedusha. Don't work in the fields. Don't build houses. Stay at home. Dveikus to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Spend time with your family. Learn Torah. Shmita Sa'oretz is about the land. Yes, you need to abstain from working. Why? It's about the result. V'shavsa ha'oretz Shabbos lasha. Another yesod that I spoke about many times, those mitzvahs that are all about the result. Even when you perform those mitzvahs with a non-Jew, the mitzvah is yours. You probably remember the Machna Ephraim that I mentioned many times. Perek Yud Aleph El Cheshluch, and the Machna Ephraim says you can build a makkah, you can have a goyish worker, and you say the bracha. Ein shlichus l'nachi. We don't need shlichus. It's all about the result. And the Machna Ephraim calls the Pri Chodesh regarding Tvilas Kalim. You could have a non-Jewish worker bringing the Kalim to the mikvah, to the ocean, or to the river. He does the tefillah and you say the bracha. Because tefillas kelim, once again, is all about the result. There is no avoidus ukeil be'etzem hatefillah. And that is my interpretation of the Rambam. In Protei HaMitzvahs, the Rambam doesn't write halachas. He writes the essence. The essence of Shvisa Sa'oretz is Shetishvei Sa'oretz. But on Perek Aleph Halacha Aleph, the Rambam writes the halachas, and the halacha is lishbois, and the avera is kalo oisa malacha. However, if you have a non-Jewish worker and he's working for you, it is considered as if you are the one working in a field. So my compromise between the Minchas Chinuch and the Chazon Ish is a Chumrah and a Kula. I don't think the Minchas Chinuch is right. If a non-Jewish worker works in my field against my will, he's not working for me. It's against our agreement. I have no Aveda. Because mitzvahs say lish boys, koloisa malacha. Bitul mitzvahs say I'm not doing a malacha, and no one is doing a malacha for me. He's doing a malacha on his own. I bear no responsibility. But on the other hand, if he's my worker, he's working for me. I'm not only over on a mitzvah say in my understanding, I'm over on a lab as well. So Reb Shlomo told me that you learn the Tosfos Shlit. This is a very problematic Tosfos Shlit. And he seems to be soiser divrei asmai minei abei. So the Tosfos Shlit in Avodah Zarah starts off and he says clearly that Shvisas Oretz is not like Shvisas Shabbos. Lo mi domi tzivu de Shvisas Sadeh b'Shvisas tzivu de Shvisas b'Hemta b'Shabbos tzivu de Shvisas Sadeh b'Shvisas ena ela shelo yasu hu malocha b'Sadeo. Aval im hiskas Sadeo lachoshed al Shvisas ena yoyver amaskil. And it's only about lifnei iver. And then, as we continue, somehow he changes his opinion, and it's not a kasha and a teretz. And towards the end of this paragraph, he writes, you're not allowed to rent out your field on Shvius to a non-Jew, because then you're over on Shvisas Oretz. But at the beginning of this paragraph, he clearly said, no, Shvisas Sadeh was not like Shvisas Behemtoi. Shvisas Sadeh was Shelo Yasu Hu Malocha B'Sadeo. So on my sefer, I quoted the Mabit. The Mabit is Medayik. So could we scroll down and see the last section of this paragraph of the Tosfos Shlit? I will just stress. Oh, here it is. V'yesh loim the Shvisas Karka was down to B'Shvius. Osa lahaskis Sadeo lagoy B'Shvius. Aval b'Shabbos lo yisam lo Shvisas Karka. But at the beginning, he said the Yisur is only shelo yasa hu malocha b'Shvius. The Mabit is medayik from the Lashon of Tosfos Shlit. Osa lahaskis Sadeo lagoy B'Shvius. But you could rent out your field a few years before Shvius, even though you know he's going to work on Shmita. And he's medayik osa lahaska lagoy Sadeo B'Shvius. I saw no reasonable explanation in the Achronim. So many of them said that the Tosfos said Chayzavoy, but it doesn't seem that he retracts. He doesn't say, it's not. He doesn't retract from the assertions he wrote at the beginning. My understanding is so clear. When you rent out a field in Shvius, then you are benefiting directly from the guys working on Shmita. It is as if he's working for you. Okay, he's not your worker. He rents the field. But you're getting paid for avodas hasoda b'shvius. And therefore it is defined as if you are the one working. And according to my opinion, he's not only over mitzvah say, he's over in a lab as well. But if I rented it out for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, I could say, you're not working for me. We have a global agreement. You're not paying me per year. You got the field for 5 years, for 10 years, you're paying me $1 million. You do whatever you want. So from my point of view, you have the field for years. It's like Havloa. And therefore, it's not considered as if the Jew is working on Shvius. So my mahalach is Chumrah and Kula. What I want to make a point. And to me, this is such a powerful argument. Pilei Plois. By Shvisas Behemte, the Torah clearly says, Laman Yanuach, Ata, Vincha, V'techa, Avdecha v'amasecha, Ubehemtecha, Asher Mishorecha. The Torah clearly speaks about your behavior. That is Shvisas Behemte. If we go back to the Psukim we learned in the beginning of this year, I stressed that the mitzvah say is 3 times. V'shavsa ha'oretz Shabbos l'Hashem. Boy, Shnas Shabboson tia la'oretz. Shabbos Shabboson yia la'oretz. In all 3 psukim, it's not aretzecha, ha'oretz. And dafken the lav, the Torah says, sodcho lo tisra, v'karmecho lo tismor. Regarding the lav, nobody ever dreamed that a person is entitled to work in his day after, that a person could plow the fields or sow the fields if they're not his. It's not mine. So everybody understands, sadcho doesn't mean your field, and karmecho doesn't mean your vineyard. It means the fields of the people, of Klal Yisrael, the fields of Eretz Yisrael. So why would it occur to the Minchas Chinuch that dafkin the mitzvah say, and the mitzvah say is not artzacha, it's not sadcha, b'shavsa ha'oretz, Shabbos Shabboson yela oretz, Shnas Shabboson yela oretz. So why would we compare this to Shvisas Behemte? Shvisas Behemte is about Behemtecha. Shvisas ha'oretz has nothing to do with ownership. Nothing to do with ownership. It has all to do, are you working or are you not working? Bein mitzvahs to say, bein mitzvahs lo ta'aseh. There would be more room to argue that you're not even on the lav only if you own the soda. Because by the lav, the Torah says, sod choloitis, la kama choloitis more. V'afal piken, milse de pshita, sod chulav davka, kama chulav davka. Kal v'chomer, regarding the mitzvahs asay, because in the mitzvahs asay, the Torah doesn't say artzacha or sadcha or kama, but rather the shavsarts. And that is why I think the Chazon Ish is right. The Chazon Ish is right. It has nothing to do with whether the field is yours or not. However, as I pointed out in my sefer, Chazon Ish Siman Yud Zay, us, Chav Daled or Chav Gimel, Shvius, Chazon Ish seems to contradict himself, and the Chazon Ish says, if you have a field and a Goyish worker works in your, and a Jew works in your field, he is over, and you're over as well. Seems to be a stira. I think the Chazon Ish agrees with the Minchas Osher. He's working for you. And if he's working for you, you are over Aveira. Because the essence of Shvisas ha'oretz is shetishbois ha'oretz ma'avoida b'shvius. Like the Rambam writes in Protei HaMitzvos, in his introduction to Elchas Shmita v'Yovel and Protei HaMitzvos. I understand that last week, I couldn't make it. I couldn't go to Shiur in person, but you heard a Shiur that I gave in America some months ago about purchasing land in Israel. Is it an inyan? Maybe I'm a bit too harsh on this subject, but the only reason I voice my opinion because I really think those farmers in Israel that leave their fields barren, they are Geboide Koyach and they deserve our support. And instead of giving money to Keren HaShvius to support them, various different bodies, entrepreneurs are selling pieces of land in Israel. And this is, to some of them, it's just a business. And I don't think it's a mitzvah at all. And one of the reasons I say it's not a mitzvah because Shvisa Soretz has nothing to do with ownership. Has nothing to do whether the field is yours or not. So if you have a park next to your house and you don't plant anything in the park, you're mekayim the mitzvah of Shvisa Soretz. Doesn't depend whether the land is yours or not. A person would laugh and say, but I don't have any permission to plant anything in the park. Okay, that's right. You don't have permission. But if you're living in America and you buy a piece of land in the Galil and you don't even know where it is, and even if you would like to, wouldn't be financially viable to fly to Israel to plant anything in that Amma or Amma that you purchased in Eretz Yisrael. So what's the mitzvah? The mitzvah is if you have land and you live off that land like farmers in Eretz Yisrael, and you desert the land, that is what the Torah means. B'shavsa ha'aretz shamas Hashem. So in my opinion, it doesn't depend whether the land is yours or not. It depends, are you working? Is anybody working for you? If anybody's working for you, it is considered as if you are the one working, like Tvidas Kalim, like at Lokas Ner Shabbos, like Asiyas Amaka, and other sources that I wrote. When a mitzvah, whether it's an aseh or a lot aseh, is all about the result. Whoever brings about that result bears responsibility, letav u'lemutav, for better and for worse. And therefore, it all depends, is anybody working for you? And there's another nafka minute. So many of us in Eretz Yisrael live in from communities, but there are still thousands upon thousands of from people that I've known from neighbors. And you have a garden in front of your house, and the neighbors don't keep shvius. And they tend to the garden just like they do all the other years. So some say you need to be mafker your chelik in the garden. I don't think hefker is chal. And this is a very fundamental argument. I think the kinyan that a person has in the stairwell, the roof, all the shared rechush, I don't know how it's defined in English, achalakim hamishutafim shel habinyan, that is the kinyan that is imposed on you. It's not to your benefit. You bear responsibility for maintenance, for cleaning, tending the garden, the common areas of your home. If you have a condo, you don't have a private house, like most of us. You live in an apartment building. So the common areas, that's a kinyan that is imposed on you. Person can't say, I am mafka the stairwell, so I don't need to pay by the bayit. You know, I'm a guest. I was mafka my chelik. I don't want to pay for the gardener. I don't want to pay for maintenance because it's not mine. I'm mafka. No, I don't think a person could be mafka his chelik in the garden because that hefker has no relevance. No relevance. Could anybody be zoich in your chelik? And if he's zoich in a chelik, what benefit does he have? What benefit does he have? Neighbors are not entitled to plant bananas in the garden in front of their home. It's intended just for the neighbors to enjoy flowers or whatever they decide jointly to do with their garden. So anyway, I don't think there's a need to be mafkir. But the frum neighbor does need to notify his neighbors. I object. If you would listen to me, I'm a shomer mitzvahs. I don't want the gardener to work. I agree he should work in compliance with Hilchas Shavias. There are things that are permissible. So once you object and you make clear to your neighbors, I have no part in this. I'm not going to fight with you. So I'm going to pay Vada Bayit. And you decide what to do with my money. But I disagree to have the gardener work in the garden. That is enough. And you bear no more responsibility. Because in my opinion, Shvisa Soretz is not like Shvisas B'Hem Toy. So my Mahalach is somewhat of a compromise between the Chazon Ish and the Minchas Chinuch. And what is appealing about my understanding is it's miyashiv the Rambam, because the Protei mitzvahs is a right to the Minchas Chinuch, and a Lochalav is a right to the Chazon Ish. So that is why my Mahalach is so appealing to me, hopefully to others as well. So what we did in today's Shiur, the first section of the Shiur was an overview, going through the psukim in Parshas Bahar, understanding that there are two fundamental different sugyas. Shvisas Oris is one, and Kedushas Shvias, Kedushas Aperes is number two. Most of the actual shilas we have in Israel, living in Israel, is in category number two, Kedushas Aperes. That is very complex, very many sugyas, and some of them are Shanui b'machloikis between Gedolei Eretz Yisrael. Most notably, Peres Nachem is their Kedushas Shvius and Peres Nachem, because there are two fundamental approaches in Eretz Yisrael. How do we deal with Kedushas Shvius? So the first part of today's Shiur was just a very brief and general overview, and then we did delve somewhat into the Gedorim of Shvisas Ha'oretz, the machlokes between Minchas Chinuch and Chazon Ish, and Enu Mahalach, which is my understanding, based on the Rambam and also based on the Tosfos Sorid. And my Mahalach yesh bo chumra, yesh bo kula. If a non-Jew was working for you, you're not only mevatel the mitzvahs to say you're over on the lav, and if he's working in your field against your will, you bear no responsibility, and you don't need to be mafker, unlike Shvisas Behemtei.